What is up, guys? I'm your friendly neighborhood web war fanatic, and we are back with another Marvel Champions video. And today we will be doing a hero review slash analysis of Spider-Man Miles Morales. And this hero was requested by the members of this channel, so I had a community poll asking the members of this channel, which heroes do you want to see me do a hero review for next? And I still want to do Nightcrawler and Magneto whenever they released, but until then, I don't know what other heroes to do. So all the heroes that you guys suggested will be on the priority list for me. So there's a lot of different suggestions here, and I decided because there's one hero that got suggested twice. So shout out to Sean here who recommended Miles Morales, and also shout outs to Ike who also recommended Ironheart, Miles Morales, and Quicksilver. So I saw, the only name I saw twice here was Spider-Man Miles Morales. So he's the hero that we are going to be taking a look at right now and have all of his hero cards pulled up here on Hall of Heroes. But I do want to give a huge shout out and thank you to all the members of the channel. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate y'all's support and helps the channel out a lot. So let's go ahead and jump into Miles Morales right here. So when I am evaluating a hero, there are 5 major categories that I think are the most important for every single hero. So that is their thwarting, attack, survivability, economy, and versatility. For each major category, we have 3 subcategories, which I think round out that major category. So for thwarting here, it's going to be stat line, control, and cards. And Miles Morales is an amazing thwarter. So if we take a look at his stat line for thwart, so Miles Morales has a stat line of 222, which is really good, and that is pretty much the standard card that we are looking for in a hero. In my opinion, it's very important to have a thwart stat of 2, more so than an attack stat of 2 or a defense stat of 2, because you want to start off the game and have the ability to thwart off side schemes that start off in play or initial thwart on the main schemes. So being able to do that without drawing into any thwart events, I think is a really, really big deal and helps a hero out a lot whenever you're playing the game. So Miles Morales has that thwart stat of 2. If he has 1, I would not give him the point. 2 or higher is very, very good. So he definitely gets a check mark here for me for the thwart stat line. The next subcategory that we have is the control for a hero. So does this hero have a way to mitigate threat or to flip down safely if they need to recover? And Spider-Man Miles Morales is one of the best at this. So let me see. So he has a couple different ways. So the first one is Swing In, which is his thwart event. It's a 2-cost event. Hero action thwart. Remove 4 threat from a scheme. If you pay with this card using a mental resource, resolve Spider-Man's spider camouflage ability. So this is referring to Spider-Man's hero text here, which says spider camouflage special. Gives Spider-Man a tough stats card and a confuse enemy. These specials right here, the Venom Blast and the Spider Camouflage, they cannot be triggered unless another card refers to them and tells you to trigger them, right? So Swing In is that card that tells you to resolve the special on Spider-Man's Spider Camouflage. So this special right here is to give him a tough stats card and you can confuse an enemy. So that confuse there is huge to allow him to flip down safely. In addition to that, he also has double life. It's a 1-cost event, max 1 per round. Action, change your form. So you can flip down to Alter Ego if you play this card in hero form. If you're in Alter Ego and you play double life, you can flip over to hero form. And if you pair this card using a physical resource, you can ready your identity, which is really, really big. So basically, Spider-Man Miles Morales, he can flip down to Alter Ego and then flip back over to hero form with your manual 1 flip per turn if he uses double life. And the villain will not scheme, so you can mitigate the threat while accessing your Alter Ego. Swing In will also confuse the villain if they're susceptible to being confused, and that'll also allow Miles to flip down. So he has many different ways to flip down, so he'll definitely get a check mark for the control of just giving him the breathing room to be able to flip down safely. The next subcategory for thwarting is the cards. So what cards does Spider-Man Miles Morales have? Does he have good thwarting cards? And he definitely does have good thwarting cards like we talked about before. The Swing In, it's a 2-cost event that removes 4 threat, which is already a really good curve. But also, when you pay for it with the mental resource, you can get a tough stats card on your identity, and you can confuse enemy. So that's so much value in just 2 costs. And being able to pay for it with the mental resource is not very difficult for Spider-Man Miles Morales because he has his web shooters here, which is a 1-cost upgrade that Peter Parker Spider-Man also has, but this comes in with 3 web counters, and if you exhaust it, you can generate a wild resource, right? So the wild, you can declare it as anything, including a mental resource. So all the kickers for Spider-Man Miles Morales events where you required a mental resource or a physical resource, or for the web shot and energy resource, these are very, very easy for Spider-Man to pay for because of those web shooters that can generate wild resources. So really good thwarting event. Spider-Man is one of the best thwarters in the game. He definitely gets a 3 out of 3 for his thwarting ability of stat line, control, and cards. So let's take a look at the next major category, which is going to be Spider-Man Miles Morales' attack. So for the first subcategory of Spider-Man's attack ability, we are going to be taking a look at his burst damage. Does Spider-Man Miles Morales have big burst damage? And in my opinion, I do think that having big burst damage is very, very valuable in Marvel Champions because it's hard to make up for in aspect cards. And if you don't have big burst damage, you will be taking a lot of retaliate from the villain, and there's a lot of villains that have mechanics that will punish you for doing small instances of damage to those villains, right? Venom Goblin is my favorite example because if you do not burst down his stage 3, his one review is to do you 3 face down counter cards that you have to all review if you cannot gun him down. So let's go ahead and take a look at Spider-Man's burst damage here. So his main attack is actually going to be the web shot right here, which is a 2-cost event. Hero action attack, deal 4 damage to the enemy. If you pay for this card using a energy resource, then you can resolve Spider-Man's Venom Blast ability. So Venom Blast right here says special, deal 2 damage to the enemy, and you can stun that enemy. So if you're paying 2 costs for web shot and you use an energy resource, you can do 4 damage plus 2, so it's going to be 6 damage for just 2 costs and a stun, which is really, really efficient. However, it's just not a lot of damage, right? Only 6 damage is not exactly what we're looking for. Even if you play all 3 web shots, you can do 18 damage, which isn't the biggest burst. His biggest actual damage card is the Arachno Bags right here, which is a 1-cost event. Hero action attack, do 2 damage to enemy. So it always does at least 2 damage to enemy. Then if the enemy has a stun status card, you do 3 additional damage. And if it has a confused status card, do an additional 3 damage to it. So it can potentially be a 1 for 2, or 1 for 5, or a 1 for 8. Now, if it is a 1 for 8, that is crazy good, and that would attribute a lot to Spider-Man's burst damage. However, this condition, in my opinion, is not the easiest thing to maneuver around, right? If you stun an enemy or confuse them, usually they will activate during the next villain phase, and then they will lose their stun or confuse status. You need to really play the swing in and play the Ragnar Bags on the same turn, or play the web shot and then play the Ragnar Bags right after that to really get that off. Right? Unless the villain is not putting a lot of pressure on you, like it's a very easy villain, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to attach that stun and confuse an enemy and keep it on there for a whole round, and then to play the Ragnar Bags for maybe the next turn to do your big damage off. Another big thing to consider are villains that have stalwart. So if you're facing a Thanos or like a Venom Goblin stage 3, and Venom Goblin stage 3 is actually the biggest villain where you really, really want to gun him down, he has stalwart. So the moment that you flip him over, the Arachno Bags will only do 2 damage to him because he cannot have a stun or confused status attached to a stalwart villain. So Arachno Bags is pretty much just a 1 for 2 in situations like that. Now some of you guys might think it's a little bit unfair to evaluate Spider-Man's burst damage based on star villains, and I think that I am trying to encapsulate every single villain in the game when I am trying to evaluate a hero, and the Arachno Bags is just not consistent because not only do you need to have a stun and confused status card on a non-stalwart villain, but for all the stalwart villains in the game, you won't be able to do that, right? So it is an inconsistent source of damage in my experience playing Spider-Man Miles Morales, and Venom Goblin is definitely the one villain in the game where you want to gun him down the most, and Spider-Man is missing his biggest attack damage against that star villain where it's really necessary for you to have that burst damage. So unfortunately, I cannot give Spider-Man that check mark for his burst damage, but he definitely can have a lot of burst damage on a lot of the easier villains. But for me, I need to have that against every single villain. And against villains that have more pressure or the more difficult villains, I do think that he is missing that burst damage. And those are really the villains where you really need the burst damage the most anyways. So unfortunately, he does not get a point for that. Let's move on to the next subcategory. And that's going to be the instances of damage. In my opinion, it is very important for a hero to have many small instances of damage in Marvel Champions. This will help you deal with minions. This will help you ping off tufts from the villain or other minions. If a hero has piercing, I'll also attribute to this category. This will also help you get rid of stuns or bypass a stun. And it'll also help you do damage even if your hero gets exhausted through like exhaustion or other nasty encounter cards. So Miles Morales is actually one of the best heroes in having small instances of damage. He is one of my favorite heroes, and it goes to hero for that. So let's take a look at his kit here. So he has the web shot that we talked about before, right? It's a 2-cost event, but it actually does 2 instances of damage if you pay for it with a energy resource, right? You do 4 damage to enemy, and that is a hero action attack. So if you are facing a villain with retaliate, you will take a retaliate for that first instance. But whenever you resolve Spider-Man's Venom Blast ability, let's take a look at Venom Blast right here. It says special, deal 2 damage to enemy, stun that enemy. So you do not have to trigger the special Venom Blast on the exact same enemy that you hit with the web shot. So this can bypass guard, it will bypass retaliate, and just do 2 damage on whoever you want and stun that enemy. So it's a great way to have an extra source of damage if Spider-Man needs it. Arachnobatics is another great way to do an extra source of damage because it's just a 1 cost event. So even if you're facing a stalwart villain, it does 2 damage for 1 cost, which is a great way to get rid of a stun if you need to. And then Spider-Man also has the double life right here, which is a 1 cost event. Change your form if you pair this card using a physical resource, ready or identity. So at worst, this can just be a straight ready, right? So if you're in hero form, you are exhausted because of exhaustion, or you attacked already and you need to attack again. If you play a double life with the physical resource, you flip over to Alter Ego, and then you ready up. You can just do your manual flip back to hero form, and you're readied up now, so now you can just swing and attack again, right? So this ready right here is effectively giving Spider-Man another source of damage and just another small ping to help him get rid of a tough or deal with the minion or just to get rid of stun. So definitely for Spider-Man Miles Morales, getting stunned or getting confused is not that big a deal for him. So he definitely gets a check mark here for these small instances of damage. And then finally, what is the cost curve for Spider-Man's attack events? When you're playing this hero, does it feel like he can do a lot of attacks in 1 turn and still have the economy to do other stuff? And Spider-Man definitely feels like he can, right? He has super duper cheap attack events, with the Arachnobatics being a 1 cost event, the web shot being a 2 cost event. He definitely has a lot of very, very cheap events, so it feels like they're very easy to play. So he definitely gets a check mark for here. So overall for Spider-Man's attacking ability, I give him a 2 out of 3. He's missing that big burst damage, but he has one of the best small instances of damage, and he has a very, very good cost curve for those attack events. So let's take a look at the next major category, which is going to be Spider-Man survivability. So the first subcategory for that is going to be the alter hero or the hero card, basically the identity card. And I think that this is very important when you're looking at a hero survivability, because can this hero survive if you do not draw into defense events or if you don't draw into cards that can help him survive, right? On just their bare bones kit, if you get really unlucky with extra villain activations or on turn 1, can they survive? And unfortunately, Spider-Man Miles Morales does not have anything on his identity card that helps him survive here. So let's take a look at his alter ego. So he has a recovery stat of 4, which is above the curve. That's a very good recovery because anything above 3 is going to be good, but you don't need to use that necessarily on turn 1 or anything, right? Because you have full hit points. Hand stats of 6, which is very normal, and it's a hit point here of 9, which is a little bit under the curve. And we're looking for at least 10 hit points on hero, so having anything less than that makes a hero feel like they're a little bit squishy and a little bit more prone to getting knocked out easily. Miles has a response here. After you change to his alter ego, you can shuffle 1 Spider-Man card from your discard pile into your deck. So any one of his identity specific cards here, you can shuffle it back into your deck. That doesn't necessarily help with his survivability, especially on a turn 1 or immediately at least, because it goes into the deck, not into your hand. And then for his hero side here, same thing with the hit points of 9. He has 2 defense, so that's just an average defense. It's still not really enough if the villain's hitting you for a lot. And then he does have the Venom Blast and Spire Camouflage, right? So Spire Camouflage will give him a tough status card. The Venom Blast can stun enemy. However, I'm not going to attribute this stuff on his identity card as actually being a part of his identity card, because the way that I value this category is in a practical sense, not in a literal sense, right? So practically, he cannot trigger these abilities by himself. You need to use other outside cards to trigger these abilities, right? So he's effectively having a blank text box. And whenever you play your swinging event right here, right, this 2-cost event, you can effectively get that tough stats card through triggering Spire Camouflage. But the effect is tied into playing the swing-in. If you never play a swing-in, or if you never played a... he also has his defense mechanism, which is a 1-cost upgrade that can also trigger the Spire Camouflage. If you don't play these 2 outside cards, you will never trigger the Spider Camouflage, which can give Spider-Man a tough stats card, right? So tough is very, very good to helping his survivability, but he does not necessarily have it on his identity card itself. It comes from the outside cards whenever you're playing him, even though it's printed on this card. So literally it's printed on the card, but practically you cannot access it unless you play outside cards. So I am not going to give him a point here for the identities card having survivability. The next subcategory that we have here are the cards in his kit. Does Spider-Man Miles Morales have cards in his kit to add to his survivability? And he definitely does. We just talked about it, right? So that's going to be with the swing-in, because if you play this card with a mental resource, he gets a tough stats card. He has ways to stun enemies, to stun the villain, stuff like that, which can allow him to add more survivability to his kit because he won't be taking an extra activation. He also has the defense mechanism, where that can trigger the Spiral Camouflage again and give him a tough status card. The Power Within will do the same thing, but trigger the Venom Blast to give him another stun, right? So being able to stun enemies and being able to give himself a tough status card is definitely ways for Spider-Man to get his survivability up, even though he has a hit points out of 9. And then finally, the healing here. Does this hero have an outside way of healing? And this one is a little bit iffy for me. You could say that there should be an asterisk right here. So I personally went ahead and gave Spider-Man the point here for healing, because he does have a recovery stat of 4, which is above the curve. And because of the double life here, he can easily flip down, recover, and then flip back over, right? And then still be readied up because of the double life, right? So if you are already readied up, you can flip down to Alter Ego, you can exhaust recover by 4, play double life, flip over to hero form, be ready back up, and still use your basic activation. So I feel like that's a pretty consistent way to recover. And if it was just that, I probably wouldn't give him the point, but his response in Alter Ego allows you to shuffle in one of his identity specific cards, so you can put the double lives back into your deck from your discard pile and keep on recurring them, which can give you a more reliant way to heal. And he does have the recovery stat of 4. So I do feel like Spider-Man does have a pretty good way of healing, even though it's not very that conventional, and his ready effect is through an event. And I usually only give heroes a point for this category if they have an upgrade that allows them to heal, because the upgrades are so much more consistent. But I'm going to just give him the point because he has a recovery stat of 4, and the event is pretty consistent because his Alter Ego ability can allow him to recur that event over and over again. So practically, I do feel like he has an easy way of healing outside of just using the basic recovery and not being able to get that ready. So I will give him a point here for this. So for Spider-Man Miles Morales' survivability, I gave him a 2 out of 3. You could argue that there should be an asterisk here on the healing, and maybe it should just be 1 out of 3. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about that. But I think that 2 out of 3 is pretty fair. Next, the next big category that we have is the economy for Spider-Man. And we have 3 categories here. The first one is going to be the identity card once again. And I think that is very important for a hero to have an identity card that has economy to start the game off with, right? Because on that turn 1, you don't have any resource generators. Can you still pay for a lot of stuff without drawing into those resource generators? And Spider-Man does not have any economy on his identity card, right? We took a look at his Alter Ego already. It's a response that helps you recur cards back into your deck, but doesn't add any resources into your hand. And it doesn't have any immediate board presence. For his hero side right here, the Venom Blast and Spiral Camouflage, it's effectively blank, right? Because these cards or these specials only trigger through outside cards. So this does not add to his economy at all. So Spider-Man does not have anything, and he has a regular hand size here of 6 in Alter Ego and 5 in his hero form, which is standard, which is normal, but it's not enough to give him a point here for the identity card having economy. The next subcategory for economy is going to be the cards in his kit. Does he have resource generation? Does he have ways to get his resource management up? And Spider-Man Miles Morales definitely does have that through the web shooters right here. So the web shooter is that 1-cost upgrade that we talked about earlier. You can exhaustively generate a wild resource. After you do it 3 times though, it goes away. And he also has Genki Lee, which is a 2-cost support. If you exhaust Genki Lee, you can draw a card. If you're in hero form, you have to discard a card. But if you're in Alter Ego, then you can draw a card for free and not have to discard it. And because Spider-Man has those confuses and he has so many ways to flip down to Alter Ego with his double life as well, Genki Lee oftentimes is a very, very good card that gives you a free card draw, and because you're able to access your Alter Ego so much, right? So because of this and the web shooters, it's not the most economy of the heroes in the game, but this definitely adds to his economy, and they are both good cards. So I will definitely give Miles a point here for the cards. And then finally, for the cost curve of just his overall cards, Miles Morales has one of the best cost curves in the entire game of Marvel Champions. They're all super duper cheap cards, right? These are all 1-cost cards, 2 costs for Jefferson Davis, 2 costs for Genki Lee. These are all 2 costs right here, 2 costs, and these are all 1 cost. So he doesn't even have any 3-cost cards. So even though his economy isn't necessarily super duper high, he feels pretty efficient whenever you're playing him because all of his cards are super duper cheap to play. Unfortunately, he doesn't have that many ways to build out his board as much because he doesn't have access to the Quinn carrier because he's not an Avenger, unless you do something like a build support to sheet it out. And yeah, I mean, you just play an Avengers Mansion or Helicarrier, and that's pretty much all that Miles currently has. But with the Web of Life and Destiny, if you get the Web Word combo off, he can also ramp up his economy crazy high with that. So yeah, even though Spider-Man Miles Morales doesn't necessarily have like the best way to build out his board and to get all the resource generators in play, he doesn't necessarily need it because of how cheap all of the cards in his kit are. So whenever you're playing him, he definitely feels like it's very easy to pay for all of his events. So he definitely gets a check mark here for the cost curve of his economy. So I gave him a 2 out of 3 for that. And then finally, the last major, or for the economy here, I gave him a 2 out of 3 for the total score. And then finally, for the last major category, it's going to be a hero's versatility. And for this, I have the in-game versatility, cancels, and the aspect versatility. So for Miles' in-game versatility, I went ahead and gave him a point for that. This could be argued a little bit. There might be an asterisk on here. So he could definitely do a lot of different things in the game and choose to do whatever he wants, right? He can rush, he can build out. But I do feel like most of the time whenever I'm playing Spider-Man, I am forced to a very tempo type of build, and I have to lean into stun and confuses. And I don't necessarily want to lean into stun and confuses all the time, but I feel he kind of forced me in that route, right? So if we take a look at his cards here, I mean, almost all of his cards have something to do with the stun and confuse, right? The Ragnarok has a stun and confuse trigger. Swing in, you can confuse an enemy. The web shot, you can stun an enemy. And one thing I do want to note is that all the events in Spider-Man's kit, they are still efficient even if you don't get the stun and confuse off, but he definitely does not feel as powerful without that, right? So paying 2 for 4 damage plus Venom Blast, which would be 2 more damage. 2 for 6 is still really, really cheap, but the stun is amazing on top of that. For the swing in, you can still get a tough stats card and 4 threat move, which is amazing, but getting the confuse is like that cherry on top. And missing out on those extra stats on a villain if they have stalwart does make Miles feel substantially weaker. And yeah, even his power within and defense mechanism, they're also tied into being able to stun and confuse a villain, although they have other effects too, right? The defense mechanism can also give Miles a tough stats card, and power within can also do 2 damage by triggering the Venom Blast and the Spider Camouflage, respectively. But yeah, I mean, overall, I will go ahead and give him a point, but I do feel like whenever I'm playing him, I am forced to do a lot of stun and confusing, and I am forced to play a more of a tempo style, like always doing damage every single turn, and not necessarily having the breathing room to build out my board as slow as I like to play sometimes. But I will still give him a point because he is so powerful. He can do so many different things that I do think that he can shift to a lot of different play styles, and I will give him the point here for the in-game versatility. Next, for the cancels, I'm looking for encounter card cancels because if you flip down to Alter Ego or if the threat is very, very high, can you cancel a villain activation like in advance or if they attack you again? And Spider-Man Miles Morales definitely does not have any source in his kit to cancel an encounter card or a villain activation, right? So I'm definitely not going to give him a point for that. And then finally, for the aspect versatility, can you play Spider-Man in different aspects and does he still work as well? And he definitely does. He has very, very good aspect versatility. He plays super duper well in aggression. He plays really good in justice, in protection, and in leadership, right? Yeah, leadership is super duper strong with all the web warriors. Aggression is the way that I first played him, right? You can stun lock and just do a lot of damage every single turn, playing in more tempo style. Justice, you can flip down a lot. You use float like a butterfly to get more damage off on a confused villain. And in protection, that can really help get his survivability up. And oftentimes when you're playing Spider-Man Miles Morales, you're really leaning into his 15 identity-specific cards anyways. That's kind of my big gripe with him, is that his identity-specific cards are so good, right? We're talking about the swing in, 2 costs for 4 threat removal, a tough and a confuse, web shot, 2 for 6 damage and a stun, but damage on 2 different enemies, right? With the attack and the Venom Blast doing a different enemy or the same enemy, right? So versatile, so much value. Whenever I'm playing Spider-Man Miles Morales, I feel like through any aspect, I'm usually just playing his identity-specific cards over and over again because they take the precedence. They are just super duper good value. So that's kind of a pro, but also kind of a con because I feel like the aspect cards affect his kit a little bit less than other heroes because I'm still primarily playing his cards over the aspect cards. But overall, he definitely still has that aspect versatility. So for that, I gave him, for versatility, I gave Miles a 2 out of 3. And for the overall score for Spider-Man Miles Morales, he's missing 1, 2, 3, 4 ticks here. And he has kind of an asterisk for the healing for survivability and kind of an asterisk for the in-game versatility. But I wouldn't give him points for that. But he is still a super duper strong hero. I gave him an A tier evaluation. I think that he belongs to A tier. He's a super duper powerful hero. And I think that he demolishes 90% of scenarios in the game Marvel Champions. However, that cream of the crop, the toughest villains, in my opinion, do give him some difficulty especially Venom Goblin. I have a few Venom Goblin games with Spider-Man Miles Morales on the channel, and I have struggled because the Ragnarbags doesn't do damage to Venom Goblin Stage 3 because he has Stalwart, and Steady is a little bit more difficult for Miles to deal with because you need to stun twice or confuse twice to get that activation through. But that being said, I definitely think that Spider-Man can defeat all villains in a game, and I do have playthroughs on my channel defeating Expert Ronin, Expert Venom Goblin, and Expert Magneto with Spider-Man Miles Morales. However, they were a bit tougher than I would have liked, so he can definitely still do it, but in my opinion, he does struggle a little bit, so he's going to go here in the A tier for me, and most heroes that I have 4 missing boxes for, I will usually put them into A tier. So yeah, that is my breakdown here of Spider-Man Miles Morales. I think that he demolishes the easier scenarios, but does have a little bit of trouble with the top tier scenarios. I definitely want to know what you guys think. Do you guys agree or disagree with my points here? And I just want to thank you guys again. Huge shouts to all the members of the channel. Thank you guys so much for all of your suggestions. I'll definitely be taking a look at those heroes next, and hopefully you guys enjoy this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.